Gopi Jana Balavad Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balavad Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balavad Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Parivrajapacharya, Ashtotara Sarashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakori Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridasta Kora Ki Jai, Prem Se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pavanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha, Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavana Dhamma Ki Jai. New Govardhana Dhamma Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. O gloriously assembled devotees. O gloriously assembled devotees. O gloriously assembled devotees. O glorious to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Meganati Marandasya Ganananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakopadruvyascha Kriva Sindhuvayavacha Paritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Utsangan Narado Jagne Daksho Nukta Gashtat Swayambhuvaha Pranadvashishta Sanjato Vrigostvachi Karat Kratu Utsangan Narado Jagne Dakshon Gushtat Swayambhuva Pranadvashishta Sanjato Vrigostvachi Karat Kratu Utsangan Narado Jagye Dakshon Gushtat Swayambhuvaha Pranad Vashishta Sanjato Vrigostvachi Karat Kratu Utsangan Narado Jagye Dakshon Gushtat Swayambhuvaha Pranad Vashishta Sanjato Vrigustvachi Karat Karatu. Ladies. Utsangan Narado Jagye Dakshon Gushtat Swayambhuvaha Pranad Vashishta Sanjato Vrigustvachi Karat Karatu. Utsangan Narado Jagye Dakshon Gushtat Swayambhuvaha Pranad Vashishta Sanjato Vrigustvachi Karat Karatu. Utsangat, by transcendental deliberation. Naradaha, Mahamuni Narada, Jagye, was generated. Dakshaha, Daksha, Angushtat, from the thumb. Swayambhuvaha, of Brahma. Pranat, from the life air, or breathing. Vashishtaha, Vashishta. Sanjataha, was born. Brigu, the sage Brigu. Twachi, from the touch. Karat, from the hand. Kratuhu, the sage Kratu. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Narad was born from the deliberation of Brahma, which is the best part of his body. Vasishta was born from his breathing, Daksha from a thumb, Vrigu from his touch, and Kratu from his hand. Translation responsibly. Narad was born from the deliberation of Brahma, which is the best part of his body. Vasishta was born from his breathing. Daksha from a thumb. Bhrigu from his touch. And Kratu from his hand. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Narad was born from the best deliberation of Brahma, because Narad was able to deliver the Supreme Lord to anyone he liked. The Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be realized by any amount of Vedic knowledge or by any number of penances. But a pure devotee of the Lord, like Narad, can deliver the Supreme Lord by his good will. The very name Narada suggests that he can deliver the Supreme Lord. Nara means the Supreme Lord, and Da means one who can deliver. That he can deliver the Supreme Lord does not mean that the Lord is like a commodity that can be delivered to any person. But Narad can deliver to anyone the transcendental loving service of the Lord as a servitor, friend, parent, or lover, as one may desire out of one's own transcendental love for the Lord. In other words, it is Narad only who can deliver the path of Bhakti Yoga, the highest mystic means for the attainment of the Supreme Lord. So, when I was researching this verse, I unpacked a fair bit of information about Narad Muni. It's described here as born from the deliberation of Brahma, which is the best part of his body. So, probably everyone else here knows the story of Narad, but I uncovered some stuff that I hadn't heard before. Narad Muni is glorified in the Vedic texts as one of the 12 Mahajans, or great authorities on eternal truth. He is the third after Krishna and Brahma in our line of succession. He is the younger brother of the four Kumaras. Details of his life and teachings are described in the Narad Purana, the Padma Purana, and throughout the Bhagavatam. As we read the Bhagavatam, Narad just pops up again and again. In fact, it is because of Narad we have the Bhagavatam. That one of Narad's disciples was Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva, after he had gone to the trouble of compiling all the Vedic literature, composing the Vedanta Sutra, he expressed that he's still feeling dissatisfaction. And Narad then instructed him, he said, it's because in those scriptures you have written or put together, you have not sufficiently glorified the name, the form, the pastimes, the glories of the Supreme Lord. So then Vyasadeva went on to make that compilation, the commentary, the natural commentary it's called, on the Vedanta Sutra, which is the Bhagavad Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have Narad to thank for that. Narad could travel freely anywhere in the universe. It said he could leave the material world and journey to Vaikuntha at will. Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, of sages among the demigods, I am Narad. When Narad visited Krishna and Queen Rukmini at Dwarka, the story in the Krishna book, Krishna offered him worship and greeted him as Bhagavan. Srila Prabhupada said, Narad is the greatest devotee in the universe. He refers to Narad Muni as the father of devotional service. So who is Narad? How did he become one of the most respected sages in all of the Vedic literature? His story begins, at least it's described in the Bhagavatam, with 2 previous lifetimes. During his first life, his name was Upabhahana. He was a Gandharva, which means a singer from one of the celestial planets. It's described that he was very beautiful. He had handsome features and a beautiful voice, which he used to make himself attractive to women, and he became a playboy, losing his spiritual perspective and falling down into material life. So in this sort of consciousness, it's described he attended a festival put on by the Prajapatis, the residents of higher planets. When performing Sankirtan to the glorious Lord, Upabana glorified the demigods. So the devotees present took this action as an offence, because Sankirtan is meant to glorify the Supreme Lord only. In fact, the second of the 10 offences that we chant of a morning, anyone know what that second one is? To consider the names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. So this Upabhahana had glorified one of the demigods in the middle of Sankirtan. And the devotees there took it as an offence. So they cursed Upabhahana to be born in his next life. That was his first life. So in his next life, they cursed him to be born as a Sudra and devoid of beauty. But as we shall see, whether a saint curses someone or blesses them, the result is the same, in the sense that the person advances in spiritual consciousness. It's described that a sadhu is equal to everyone and has the best wishes of everyone at heart. There is nobody that he feels ill towards. So when a sadhu curses, there's always a benediction in there. In fact, Narad himself cursed Nalakavara and Manigriva. Everyone probably knows that story, that they were sons of Kuvera, and they were on the heavenly planets, and they were sporting in the water with young ladies. Everybody, it sounds like a music festival. Everybody was naked, except that Nalakavara and Manigriva, they were so drunk, they were so intoxicated, they couldn't even see Narad standing in front of them. The ladies immediately covered up, but Nalakavara and Manigriva were so intoxicated. So Narad cursed them, standing naked, not using the consciousness you've been given, take the body of a tree. So he cursed them to become the Arjun trees. So in that situation, they weren't qualified, like because of that beginning, they weren't qualified to see Krishna. What had they done to deserve to see Krishna? But Krishna said, I have nothing to do with these two, Nalakavara and Manigriva. But he said, because of this statement of Narad, that at the end of the curse they will get to see the Supreme Lord. That was what Narad tied in with his curse and benediction. He said, because of that statement of Narad, I have to fulfill his prediction. Also, Narad granted them that even though they would be in the bodies of trees, they would retain their memory. And that when Krishna appeared, they would understand him to be the Supreme Lord. So, remember like a month ago we had the Dhammadashtakam festival going on? So baby Krishna, who's tied to the grinding mortar, crawls away from Mother Jasoda, still tied to the grinding mortar, and the mortar gets stuck between these two trees, and as we know, because he's the Supreme Lord, he just pulls and these giant trees come down, and from out of these trees, these two effulgent personalities emerge. Nalakavara and Manigriva. Krishna said to them, he said, Narad has saved you from abominable condition of pride due to possessing extraordinary beauty and opulence in a family of demigods. Narad has saved you from gliding down into the lowest condition. So, Upavana, back to Narad, in his next birth, remember he's been cursed to be born as the son of a Sudra. So within that curse there's also a benediction that comes about. This position, born as a son of a Sudra, He had no idea who his father was. So it wasn't a very elevated birth. In the Bhagavatam, there's a verse where Narad himself describes, he said, "In the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmins, who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service." So he's just a young boy. And because his mother is serving the sadhus, then he has the opportunity also. So here, Srila Prabhupada explains the position of the devotee is so important that if anyone renders a devotee little service, he becomes elevated to spiritual life. So this is the process that we're all engaged in, isn't it? That we have come along and basically we're all serving Srila Prabhupada, who in turn was serving his spiritual master, and those disciples of Srila Prabhupada have taken on the burden of becoming gurus themselves. We're serving them also. So Prabhupada explains this Narad Muni, he was a boy, he says 3, 4, 5 years old, just a boy with no knowledge. And the second point of this incident is not born of a high-grade family, so he didn't have pre-qualifications for, to have some sort of qualified to be instructed in spiritual life. Prabhupada said he has no certainty who was his father. Then he goes on, Prabhupada says, he was just a boy. And he describes how the sages would be talking to him. He says, "You boy, bring me this, or do this, or wash my cloth, or just set up my bedding." Like that. He said, "This much a servant, or wash this dish for me." So the devotional service is so powerful by doing this, simply by doing this little service to the yoginams, those engaged in the transcendental path, that he was blessed that in his next life he would become Narad. So this refutes, like in the early days of ISKCON, Prabhupada had experienced so much criticism from certain people in India who were complaining, you are initiating these Westerners, Malechas, into the Vedic tradition, giving them initiation. They're not qualified. But Prabhupada makes the point that there is no pre-qualification to beginning devotional service. We all arrive here having taken birth in the Western world with no pre-qualifications, most of us from the Western world. But anyone can take up this process of devotional service. The Bhagavatam goes on to describe that this little boy who was serving the sages seemed uninterested in playing like other boys. He was not naughty in any way, nor did he speak more than was necessary. Doesn't sound like a child, does it? So because of his attitude, the sages showered their blessings upon him. Narad underwent a transformation as described, and he became intoxicated with God consciousness. He meditated day and night because of the influence of the sages. And then after his mother's death, he's left alone, he became a wandering mendicant himself. So as he travelled as a mendicant, he dedicated every moment to the pursuit of spiritual realization. And one day during his meditation, the Lord appeared within his heart. He was able to see the form of the Supreme Lord in his very heart. So as described, tears of love flowed from his eyes. He gazed upon the Lord's beautiful form. And then something happened. Any of the older devotees know what happened next? And Vicky, you'd know. The Lord appears within his heart, and then the Lord, imagine you're seeing Krishna in your very heart. You're seeing Krishna. And then Krishna disappears and says to you, "Sorry, Nandu, you won't see me again in this life." Bhagavatam describes Narad's grief-stricken condition and tells that as much as he tried, he could not regain this vision of the Lord. Narad's realization was God is not at our beck and call. He appears before us by his sweet will, and if he desires to conceal himself, no amount of meditation or prayer can force him to show his hand, to appear again. But then Narad heard the Lord's voice telling him that it is not possible to see God unless you are completely pure. But he said, I have shown you this form out of kindness to increase your longing for me. I think if you saw Krishna and then he disappeared, the longing would be pretty intense. So Krishna's enticement worked. Narad now meditated on the form of the Lord more intensely than ever before. And he said, when the moment of death came, he was ready. Narad tells his disciple Vyasa, he said, being freed from all material taints, I met with death, just as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. So when the material world was, so Narad's left his body now, when the material world was created again in the next, when Lord Brahma's creating, then it's like this verse here. He creates Narad from his heart, it says here, as his most dear son. In this form, as we're reading this morning, Narad had reached perfection. The Bhagavatam goes on to describe Narad's birth wasn't forced. We're all forced into the material world. We don't have a choice. But Narad chose to appear just to render service to the Supreme Lord. His birth was completely voluntary. And also it goes on to say that his body was like Krishna's in the sense that it was transcendental and immortal, with no difference between his outer body and the animating spark, the spirit soul. So Narad is considered a perfect devotee. His teachings are found throughout the Bhagavatam. He instructs so many people on the path of pure devotion. His teachings embody the essence of selfless devotional service. His position is very special. He's considered the original spiritual master. In the purport to today's verse, Srila Prabhupada said, it is Narad only. He said, it is Narad only who can deliver the path of bhakti yoga. So Prabhupada states in his commentary in the 6th canto, the immediate spiritual master is the representative of Narad Muni. There is no difference between the instructions of Sri Narada and those of the present spiritual master. So this link from Narad comes down to us through Vyasadeva, who was Narad's disciple. And in fact, the asana where the Guru sits is called the Vyasasana, the seat of Vyasa, or Vyasadeva. So that link is there. Lord Krishna, who was feeling grateful for Narad's dedication and love, once asked him, what service could I give you, Narad? Narad replies, I pray that I may be allowed to constantly remember your lotus feet. So this is the attitude of a pure devotee. This marks Narad as the perfect guru. Many great sages have taken shelter at the feet of Narad Muni. He's the spiritual master of Valmiki, who is the author of the Ramayana. He's the spiritual master of Prahlad Maharaj, of Dhruva, the Prachetas, King Chitraketu, and many other prominent personalities. And as I mentioned before, most important for us, he's the spiritual master of Vyasadeva. He was described as a perfect brahmachari, whose sole purpose was to execute pure devotional service to the Lord. There's another that's described in the Linga Purana, I've never heard of it, that Krishna awarded Narad a veena. When you see pictures of Narad, he's always got this veena over his shoulder and playing it. And it's described that because the veena was a direct gift from Krishna, it's considered to be non-different. So therefore, Narad carries Krishna with him everywhere as he travels the material cosmos in the form of his veena. And then it's described also, because Narad was a transcendental musician, it's appropriate that he would also appear in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. when Lord Chaitanya appeared, Narad appeared as Srivas Thakur. And it was in the courtyard of Srivas, the Srivas Angan it's called, that the Sankirtan movement, full of song and dance, began. So in this way, both as Narad and as Srivas, he uses music to help spread the chanting of the Mahamantra. So this story of Narad Muni teaches us, Prabhupada explains, he said it teaches us that pure devotion is infectious. He said in a good way. Just like, he said it's like in an infectious disease, but in a good way. Pure devotion is infectious. Narad describes, he says, once only, this is while he was in that form of the boy serving the sadhus, he says, once only, by their permission, I took remnants of their food. And by doing that, all of my sins were at once eradicated. He said, thus being engaged in their service, I became purified at heart. And at the time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. That line really sort of got me. The very nature, he says, that the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. So I was thinking, we all have that experience, otherwise we wouldn't be here. Somehow or other, in our wanderings, we came here, or maybe we met the devotees on Harinam or whatever, but for some reason we were attracted to the nature of the transcendentalist. When you first meet devotees, at least my experience was, these people are unlike anyone else you've ever met. I think that's the experience we all share, isn't it? Devotees are unique, and the atmosphere around the devotees is unique. Just like in the very early days, reading, I wasn't there of course in New York, but reading like the devotees who first came to Srila Prabhupada, they were all attracted because of this sublime nature that he gave off. His complete dedication and humility, his service to his spiritual master, all these young people were just attracted. The nature of the transcendentalist was attractive to them. In the purport today, Srila Prabhupada points out, the Supreme Lord cannot be realized by any amount of Vedic knowledge. So, it's interesting, yeah, that, or by any number of penances. Doesn't matter how much Vedic knowledge we study on its own, it's just not enough to achieve spiritual realization. Prabhupada uses the example of a medical textbook, that you can go out to a store, anyone can do it. We could go to a bookstore and buy a bona fide medical textbook, and you can study it. You can know all the pages, all the stuff in there, but you will not be recognized as a doctor. It's interesting, isn't it? You can have all that knowledge, but still you won't be recognized as a doctor because you haven't gone through that path that the medical establishment authorizes, studying under an accomplished doctor. There's a sloka from Maharaj Yudhisthira in the Mahabharata. He says, simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Isn't that beautiful? The solid truth of the Vedic, of religious principles is hidden within the heart of a pure devotee. So Prabhupada says in today's purport that the Supreme Lord is not a commodity that can be delivered to any person. I think he's not like something you can order from Deliveroo. That we can't demand Krishna to appear to us. But it said Narad can deliver to anyone the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So we can't demand that Krishna appears to us, but we can engage in service to the Supreme Lord. And the way we do that is by serving his devotees. Prabhupada goes on, he said, we can have a relationship He says it in the verse today. He says, as a servitor, as a friend, as a parent or a lover, just as one may desire out of one's own transcendental love for the Lord. This reminds us that all devotees are individuals. There's no cookie-cutter stamp that produces a devotee. Everybody here is a unique individual and will remain so. And our relationship with the Supreme Lord will be unique. So I was thinking about Prabhupada's comment about we can have a relationship as a servitor, as a friend, as a lover. So we're only in Canto 3 of the Bhagavatam, and yet Prabhupada's giving us a glimpse of these emotions that can be possible further down the path. So we've been talking about the benefits of serving Krishna's devotees, or serving the Supreme Lord, which means serving his devotees. Recently I came across a quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, Prabhupada's guru. He was asked, could he point out who was his greatest follower, or who was his greatest servant? Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj had a lot of disciples. So when he was asked, he said, the greatness of a person's service is directly proportional to the love and affection that they have developed in their heart for the Vaishnavas. The greater the affection, the greater the service. Pretty amazing, huh? The greatness of a person's service is directly proportional to the love and affection they've developed in their heart for the other Vaishnavas. So this transcendental taste that we experience from rendering service gives us a taste where we experience that material experiences, material things gradually lose their taste. Therefore, a pure devotee is not at all attracted by material activities. It's described, the association of pure devotees removes the obstacles that are on our path. After the elimination of the obstacles, one can become, Prabhupada says, one can become attracted, one can have steadiness, one can have perfect taste, one can have transcendental emotions. And at last, one can be situated on the plane of loving service to the Supreme Lord. And all these stages develop simply by association. We've probably all heard devotional service even attracts Krishna. The word Krishna means all attractive. But devotional service to him, attracts even Krishna. And the symbol of the highest degree of devotional service is Srimati Radharani. Krishna is called Madan Mohan. So anyone remember what Radharani's name is? Madan Mohan Mohini. That she can attract the attractor of, like Krishna can attract even Cupid. Cupid symbolizes material desire. So Krishna can even attract Cupid. But Radharani can attract even the attractor of Cupid. A devotee always appreciates the activities of other devotees. Maharaj Yudhisthira was appreciating the qualities. Actually, it was Narad who was preaching to him. So Maharaj Yudhisthira was appreciating the qualities of Prahlad because Lord Nrsimha appeared to him, and he was thinking Prahlad is on a much higher platform. Narad Muni could understand that actually Maharaj Yudhisthira is on the same level. But he encouraged him, he said that the Pandavas were not less fortunate because, in fact, he said they were as good as Prahlad Maharaj because although Lord Nrsimhadev had appeared to Prahlad, the Supreme Personality of Godhead walked and talked, was in direct association with the Pandavas. But because of the influence of Yogamaya, Maharaj Yudhisthira is thinking that he's not fortunate at all, that he's no one, he's nothing special. But it's described that the great sages could all understand how elevated they were, and they were constantly visiting Maharaj Yudhisthira. I read something just recently by one of our senior God sisters. She said, genuine spiritual culture entails humility, respect, service to others, to all living entities. And in fact, apparently Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj was famous for when people would try and glorify him, he would say, Dasho Shmi, I am your servant. I'd like to finish there. Maybe someone has anything, any realizations or any comment they would like to make? Anything you want to add, Mani?
Thank you for the class.
I
was just going to ask how we are meant to understand the individuality like of our souls when we're like meant to be qualitatively the same as Krishna.
That we're qualitatively the same or spiritual in the same way that Krishna is, but yet we're still individuals. So how to understand that? Is that your question? My limited understanding would be that in the early stages of our devotional process, or of our devotional path, we just follow the different rules and regulations given to us by the Mahajans, like Narad Muni and other great authorities. But as that path goes on, your particular relationship with Krishna will be revealed to you without you having to try. But in the beginning, it's not advised to sort of sit around worrying about it. Mani, would you add anything to that?
Just comparing the drop of water with the ocean. It's the same quality, different quantity.
Yeah. But still there is, unlike the drop of water, there is you have an individuality which is not going to go away, which is wonderful really, that the Mayavadis, their desire is to merge, become, lose your identity. For a devotee, that's actually a hellish sort of situation, because if you lose your individual identity, how can you render service to Krishna? Every single person here has unique abilities. I can't do what Nandu does. I can't imagine how he gets all this electronic stuff working. But he can do that. He can, or Savannah, we're looking at the service she's doing daily for little Uma. Everyone has a special thing, a special service they can render. And that service is particularly attractive to Krishna. It's just, all we really have to be is patient, Prabhupada described. He said we should be confident that the path works, but patient. There was even, I heard a mundane reference, the guy that established Facebook. Anyone remember his name? Mark Zuckerberg. He said people overestimate what they can do in 12 months. They think they can bring about great changes in a year, let's say. But he said they vastly underestimate the enormous changes that can come about like in a period of, say, 5 years. So we shouldn't be too impatient. We just have to keep to the path. Maybe one last little verse I could read. Not a verse, a statement. Those who are unsatisfied feel distress throughout their body. This is the situation of people in the material world. It's almost, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you're driving, how much is in your bank balance, how big a house you live in. Generally, nobody out there is satisfied. You experience that? Like, we all want something more, isn't it? Because material things don't satisfy us. So he says that dissatisfaction can even lead to diseases. And it's true that in the material world right now, mental disturbance is practically a dime a dozen. It's not unusual. But this statement goes on, a satisfied Brahman, though, and a Brahman can be male or female, remember, a satisfied Brahman, however, he may possess nothing, but he's peaceful and calm. And there is no distress within the body or mind. I read where Prabhupada said the mind can become clear and calm. So if you can feel satisfied, then well, there's no greater gift. And this is the way we can achieve that satisfaction. We may have not very much materially, but it reminds me of a story. Some devotees were in India, and this is back in the early days, probably in the early 70s, and there were a lot of hippies went to India. So there was this poor bedraggled French hippie, dirty, dishevelled, not looking very happy. You know, you go there, you get cheap ganja or what have you, but you just become wasted. Down you go. So one of the devotees said to one of the other devotees, go and preach to him. So this devotee approached this poor looking hippie and said, why don't you come with us and we'll serve Krishna? And he said, no. He said, I don't want to do that. He said, Krishna will take everything away. So he might take everything away, but what we're left with is described by, I read just this morning, Sridhar Maharaj, the commentary on the Bhagavatam, that satisfaction, that happiness that is experienced by the devotee makes all other forms of material happiness seem like straw in the street. So we just got to stick to the path. Any other comments, Ani?
Yes, so Rupa Goswami mentions in Laghu Bhagavatam the list of Shaktavesh avatars, and Narada Muni is, of course, in the list. And one criteria Rupa Goswami gives of a Shaktavesh avatar is has an eternal body. And so it's interesting that you've just mentioned Narada Muni, the two different lifetimes, different bodies, so how to understand that? So as far as I understand, in the Garga Samhita, there's one story where Radharani curses Narada Muni to become a Gandharva. And so basically it's a Leela that where, he's exhibiting. So from the Gandharva he gets cursed as the son of a maidservant. And the lesson you can learn is by serving the Bhaktivedantas, he becomes elevated. Basically, he's regaining his original position as Narada Muni, but it's through the process of serving the devotees and getting the blessings, taking the remnants.
So he's teaching us.
Yeah. So that's the lesson we can learn, that serving the devotees can be elevated to the topmost position.
And like I read earlier, Maharaj Yudhisthira was thinking Prahlad was more advanced than himself. So that is also the attitude that we want to imbibe, to see all the other devotees as being a little bit higher than where we're at, that their service is doing much better than what I'm doing. And then we have that loving attitude. It's described also that as we get off the Kanishta platform onto the Madhyam platform, that not only do we recognize the Supreme Lord on the altar, when we come to the temple, but we recognize the devotees simultaneously as being worshipable. And that the other condition that comes about with that sort of, as Madhyam platform comes about, is that we have that attitude of forgiveness, which makes it a lot easier to live with the other devotees. Hare Krishna Prabhu's Jai. Thank you.